a rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone. Every one of you Americans, patriotic Americans who are from sea to shining sea and everywhere in between. Welcome to American Perspective. And I am your most humble host, Rick. So tonight I've got a special guest reading of the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to let you all know that even though I may not say it every day, trust me, I appreciate every single one of you. Every single one of you who comes and takes time out of your busy day to come and listen to me talk about a variety of subjects, but to talk to you about what's going on in the world and to spout off my opinions and everything else. You guys don't seem to understand what that really does to someone like myself. I appreciate every single one of you, and I cannot express that enough. But what is also fantastic is when I get new people, new followers who come along. And that brings me to this short little brief post. So as you know, I am fairly active, not so much on some of the other social media sites, but I am fairly active on X. And why am I active on X is mainly just because of the fact that X used to be a cesspool of Democrat debauchery and echo chambers. And when Elon picked it up and bought it and turned it into more of a centrist platform, that opened up the door for a lot of conservatives such as myself to go out there and spread the word, get it in front of not just the leftist lunatics, but also to those individuals who may not have fallen on either one side of the aisle or the other, who are in the center, who don't know exactly where to go with their votes. And so that's why I stayed on X and have pushed X. Well, today I picked up a new person, a new individual who has watched my stuff. Well, not watched this program yet. I'm hoping she's watching right now. But she did take a look through my history, and she expressed her appreciation for the work that I am doing. So here, just to give you a little bit of a background, Jon Cryer, the actor, is a flaming leftist when it comes to Donald Trump. And he put out something with regards to the Logan Act. Now, one thing that, again, you need to understand just really quickly is the Logan Act does have a specific phrase in it that says that whatever country is being negotiated with has to be in a dispute with the United States in order for it to be a violation of the Logan Act. In this particular case, he was referring to Donald Trump talking to Bibi Netanyahu. That is not a violation of the Logan Act because the last time I checked, we weren't in a dispute with Israel. But I responded, of course, to John, letting him know in a not so subtle way that he is a moron and that he needs to understand that the Logan Act doesn't, kick in with, without being in a dispute. And this young, I'm guessing young, but this nice individual came on and followed me because, and this is at Alyssa Hopkins 14. So Alyssa says, I'm a new follower. Thanks for what you are doing. And of course, I responded back and said, thank you. If you like what I post here, I encourage you to check out my podcast as well if you haven't already. And please spread the word too. She came back with, I will indeed. Keep up the great work. And I responded back, like I just told you folks, Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to check it out. She comes back and she says, I've been reading quite a bit of your work. I'm new and very thankful you are doing what you are. We have a country to save. And I said, yes, we do. Welcome to the party. And she says, thank you. Now, it's those kinds of interactions, the authentic interactions with somebody who is a first timer to this program, or first timer to my flavor of postings on X, that that kind of thing excites me. And I've been picking up a lot of new subscribers, or new followers, I should say, over on X. And so I thought I'd highlight her because she took the time out of her day to check out not only my responses and things, but apparently she's also checked out some of the other things that I've been saying on X. And so thank you, Alyssa. Thank you to all of you folks, to every single one of you, my longtime Whiskey Warriors, all the way back to the very first dredges of this program. And believe me, when I go back and take a look, it's like, oh my gosh, I put that out. Anyway, all the way up until today. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for taking your time out of your day in order to go ahead and do this with me now 6 days a week. All right, let's go on to that special guest on the Pledge of Allegiance. So please, if you are of mind, please stand, remove your hats, put your hand over your heart, and follow along with our special guest in tonight's Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, that wonderful flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. President, for submitting your Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, I'm chuckling. I'm kidding. It was actually a submission by 3 Chevy over on Rumble. It is AI generated, so that was not the president. Although that would be pretty classic and awesome if he were to send me a real one. But anyway, so if you would like to submit your version of the Pledge of Allegiance to the program, please go ahead and do so by recording yourself performing it. And then take that audio file and send it to me at my email address, fans, F-A-N-S, at americanperspective.online. That's fans at americanperspective.online. I'll probably have to bring that out some other time in the future. So thinking about Donald Trump, because that actually, 3 Chevy's timing was perfect on this, by the way. So, thinking about the timing on this and everything, there's one thing that happened on Thursday of last week, I believe, and I haven't really commented on it. And the reason for it is because I wanted to actually get the entire like speech for it in order to fully understand the context by which Donald Trump was mentioning it. But I have seen all over the socials, especially in the X world, everybody talking about all these veterans being pissed off because Donald Trump disparaged the Medal of Honor. Now, what I want to do for you is I want to play the clip that, of course, the lefties have thrown out in terms of it. I want you to listen to it essentially as it stands by itself, and then let me explain what I think is going on in President Trump's head. So let's go ahead and do that. I've got to grab the right thing here. There we go. So here he is. So let's take a listen to this.
I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. It's right. And they're rated equal. I have to say, Miriam.
Okay. So now that you've heard this, let me explain what I think was going through Trump's head at the time. And first of all, just to be clear, that is not necessarily disparaging the Medal of Honor. There's two, think of it as a general and an admiral, okay? A general is in charge of the army, or, in charge of something in the army. An admiral is in charge of something in the Navy. And the two are essentially different, but at what would be considered the same level. They're both high-ranking officers within the military, okay? But one's over the Army, the other one, or Marines, the other one's over the Navy, okay? Here's the problem. And honestly, this is the part that I get frustrated with Trump. Trump is Trump's own worst enemy, okay? Trump is Trump's own worst enemy because of the fact that he sometimes has where his mind goes off and he just says what's there. There's no filter. There's no questions. There's no like, oh, do I really need to say that kind of thing? And so he just, when he speaks off the cuff, more often than not, he literally speaks off the cuff. Now, that being said, okay, Donald Trump wasn't necessarily disparaging the Medal of Honor. What he was essentially saying here, I believe, is that you have two classes of medals. You have the Congressional Medal of Honor. That is given out by Congress to, I'm getting lit up over here. Yes, I understand the U.S. Air Force has generals, and I know that the Navy, and just go with the illustration here, okay? Donald Trump was essentially saying that in the soldier world, the Congressional Medal of Honor given out by Congress for, and I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it is like conspicuous gallantry above and beyond the call of duty, is the highest award that you can get in the military. Now, if you listen to what he is actually saying with regards to the receiving the medal, the majority of the people who have received the Medal of Honor receive it after they are totally harmed because of battle. There's very, very few that have been awarded, note my words, been awarded the Medal of Honor because of the fact that, and they're still either alive or they're still not terribly wounded in battle. Okay? Now, what he is referring to here is that the Medal of Honor is the highest award in the military service, and you have to go through all kinds of horrible things, and to have done greatness in those horrible things in order to be able to be awarded that medal. The Presidential Medal of Freedom is the civilian at the same status, the highest award in the civilian world, okay? The highest award in the civilian world, and you have to have done some great things, honestly, that you should. I mean, that's the thing. You have to have done some great things in order to be nominated with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Now, keep in mind, Congress gives out the Medal of Honor. The president gives out the Presidential Medal of Freedom. This does not mean that one is necessarily better than the other, unless you are thinking about the idea, which I think this is where he was going, based on his comments about her being alive and being beautiful and so on and so forth, what he was basically attempting to say, very, very badly, by the way. I am not defending how he went about this. But what I believe he is attempting to do here in this instance is to basically say that the Presidential Medal of Freedom is given out to people who haven't necessarily died or lost limbs or anything of that nature. He's not saying that one is necessarily quote unquote better than the other, unless, of course, you look at it from the standpoint of you don't have to die. You don't have to get horribly maimed and all kinds of stuff because of the military. And I'm probably not even explaining it very well here, but that's the gist that I kind of feel like that's where he was going. But again, he didn't explain it very well. He just said what he was thinking about. And it's, again, it's the context by which you look at this. Yes, as a veteran, I could easily get pissed off over the fact of Donald Trump saying that the Congressional Medal of Honor and the Presidential Medal of Freedom are equals. There is a different standard, though, to get either one of them. But the point that I believe Donald Trump was trying to make was the fact that the two of them are at about the same level in terms of high honors, in terms of the numbers that have been handed out, in terms of the fact that they're both very, very exclusive and high honors. You can't just go and be, submitted for the Medal of Honor, for an example, without doing something absolutely spectacular and incredulous. By the same token, you also can't just be given the Presidential Medal of Freedom for being just a normal, average, everyday citizen. This is where I believe Donald Trump's head was at. And to try and read anything else into it based on that small clip and how he was referring to it and how he was suggesting it, I just don't see where he is necessarily disparaging the Medal of Honor. He was attempting to identify the differences between the two and what it takes to, and I hate to say this because be awarded those awards is the best way that I can put it. Donald Trump has consistently loved the military. Donald Trump has consistently shown that he respects the military. I just don't see where he would be attempting to try and disparage the military from this point. I think, again, he was speaking extemporaneously and occasionally, just like anybody else would when they're on the spot, they can sometimes step deep into a pile of shit and they just can't quite figure out how to get out. And unfortunately, I think in this particular case, that's where it went with this. So I honestly, I am not going to necessarily say that Donald Trump is disparaging the Medal of Honor. That's not the way that I'm reading this. That's not the way that I'm hearing this. He's just basically trying to explain in his mind and in the best words that he could at the moment, the differences between the two medals and the fact that, obviously, in order to be awarded the Medal of Honor, more often than not, you are awarded it posthumously, meaning that you've died as a result of the actions that were taken for you to be awarded the medal. That doesn't mean that doesn't disparage the Medal of Honor. It doesn't disparage the Presidential Medal of Freedom either way. As a military, as a service member, I probably would say that, that the Presidential Medal of Freedom is maybe a slightly lower rank, but they're different medals. They're awarded for different things. You can't necessarily, I mean, it's kind of like an apple and an orange. The apple comes from a tree, the orange comes from a tree, but they're two different fruits. That's pretty much where I think this is at. And again, I've been waiting to talk about it mainly just because of the fact that I wanted to hear it. I wanted to listen to it. I wanted to understand maybe a little bit of where his mindset was coming from. And I honestly believe that that's where he was going. I don't think that it meant to be disparaging in any way to any of the Medal of Honor winners. That's all. All right. So now that that's out of the way, let me go ahead and tell you tonight's broadcast is sponsored by me. That's right. It's sponsored by me. You can head off to the most fantastic, the most wonderful place to get this wonderful American Perspective logo gear right here at store.americanperspective.online. That's store.americanperspective.online. Go and check out my various styles, various colors, and you can pick up whether it's logo 1, logo 2, logo 3. You can pick up various styles of t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, crew neck sweaters. You can even pick up a coffee cup or two. And you can also find links to all of my other products, whether it's the Old Whiskey Musing store, as well as the Constitution of the United States. Go and check it out at store.americanperspective.online. And I thank you, because any of the proceeds, of course, go to the show. So thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it. All right. So let's get on. It took a little longer than I wanted to. I've got a lot to get to because right now this is just incredible. I mean, I've been drinking from a fire hose for the last 24 hours. So the DNC kicked off yesterday, the festival of love and joy and whatever else. Well, apparently it was also plagued with all kinds of crazy crap. And by crazy crap, I mean that Politico itself, which is the left-wing mag, went ahead and called it out. So first of all, the biggest thing, of course, was the fact that it took several people over an hour and a half to get inside the DNC, going through security and everything else. They also had things like scheduling problems because the speeches went on longer than what they should have. They had to actually cut out 2 speeches and 1 performance in order to even fit Joe Biden in and get him on the stage by what was essentially around 11:30 p.m. on the East Coast. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the things that they kind of mentioned in this is that it's entirely possible that they planned it this way in order to keep Joe out of the spotlight. In fact, they even brought that up. The folks on being interviewed by Politico were basically saying that, yeah, this just kind of feels like maybe they intended to make sure that Biden didn't get on until after most people got to bed. Because remember, this is Monday night. Most people want to get up and go to work or have to get up and go to work the next day. So to get Joe Biden on that late was amazing. So, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. But, hey, they were proud of their electric atmosphere. They were proud of that. Well, the night kind of went on over and over and over again. They were talking about how wonderful Joe was, and he was just so incredibly, fall on the sword. He's doing this for the greater good of the country. everybody was talking about that, how Joe was just so wonderful for backing down like he did so we could get Kamala Harris. And they all forgot about the fact that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Obama, and Harris, all of them stabbed the knife in the back and freaking twisted the knife in the back and tried to usher Joe off the cliff. So this was supposed to be his grand hurrah, grand goodbye. And yeah, it turned out it was more old man yelling at clouds in his speech. So anyway, one thing that came out, and this is going to happen between now and the end of his term, Joe Biden is going to be talking about all the wonderful things that he's been doing. And one of the things that he claims that he was doing is, well, his account, let's be honest with you, this is the intern. He actually said the quiet part out loud. Here he is on X, or here his account is on X. I was proud to fulfill my promise to appoint the first black woman to the Supreme Court. Notice he doesn't say a damn thing about her qualifications. Notice he doesn't even use the term qualified. He doesn't even use the term highly qualified like a lot of people say. He essentially said that he put Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court only because she was a black woman. She's a real black woman, by the way, not the fake black woman that you see on the right there. You know, the fake black Kamala Harris, who's actually Indian. Well, he did it, Joe. You did it, Joe. You put a black woman on the court. Forget the fact that she is totally unqualified. Yeah, he admits it. He knew she was unqualified. Doesn't matter. He's going to put her on the court anyway, because that's the way Joe rolls. Joe rolls. All right. So, you know those wonderful student loan debts that they've been, getting rid of? And it was all because of the fact they wanted to relieve the burden of debt for these people, that they shouldn't be suffering under the load of student loans. They shouldn't, because they have other things to do with their money, and they have other things that need to be, taken care of. Well, there was a study done, by the way. Daily Caller calls it out here. There was a study done about student loan borrowers that were bailed out by Biden. Well, they obviously don't know how to handle their money, because guess what? They are piling up mounds of other debt. And I thought this was supposed to make their lives better. In actuality, all it did was make it worse. So here's the study by SSRN is the company that did it. But here's the study, and here's the very last couple lines in the abstract for this study. Beginning in March of 2021, the United States federal government ordered $132 billion in student loans canceled, or roughly 7.8% of the total $1.7 trillion in outstanding student debt. We find that student loan forgiveness led to increases in mortgage, auto, and credit card debt. We find small or no effects on non-student loan delinquencies. Borrowers' monthly earnings and employment fall. So maybe this student loan forgiveness wasn't that great. It wasn't that great of an idea. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Student loan debt. The borrowers who obviously couldn't manage their money because they were under the debt for so long. Yeah. They're still under debt. So it really didn't do anything for them. Yeah. Anyway. And this was a July study by Konstantin Yanalis, who is an associate professor of finance at the University of Chicago, who studies household finance, found that borrowers have accumulated other forms of debt since having their student loans forgiven. Yeah, so they just basically can't manage their money. That's the truth. That right there. That's the truth. I just can't. I just can't. Yeah, so just shift the burden of the blame and the debt from the borrower over to the taxpayer. Let's just go ahead and do that. So yeah. Anyway. Well, there's another thing. All right. Excuse me. Let me get a There's another thing that Democrats love to tout. You know, have you ever heard of this thing called UBI, Universal Basic Income? So the Democrats have been arguing that if you had a universal basic income, meaning that if the government basically paid you they think it would be like a supplemental amount, that you would take that time. You wouldn't have to worry about your debt. You wouldn't have to worry about, where money is coming from. And so you would all of a sudden become more productive. You would jump in, and maybe you would, be more of an entrepreneur now, because now all of a sudden you have all this extra time or this extra money, and you're not concerned about not paying your bills and so on and so forth. Yeah. This came out in Just the News, and this is another study. So this was a study done by a left-leaning nonprofit. And what they did here is they took a small sample size in both Illinois and Texas. Now, granted, they did it in what would consider to be a left-leaning areas, okay, around the cities. And essentially what they did is they provided two types of income. They gave out to one group, and it was randomly assigned. So they gave one group $1,500 and another group $500. And they had them essentially report back on an app that they downloaded for this study, where essentially they said, okay, well, show us how much time you do for leisure time, work time, travel time, all of these other categories. They had a bunch of categories in this thing, and essentially, and also reported their income as well. Well, to kind of sum everything up, okay, the study, which was titled "The Employment Effects of a Guaranteed Income: Experimental Evidence from 2 States," it came out last month, and it came out specifically when talking about Kamala Harris saying that she wants to give a $25,000 subsidy for eligible homebuyers to support down payments. And also, of course, too, the whole basic income idea from the Democrats. Well, the NBER conducted the study with 1,000 low-income individuals and gave them each $1,000. So it was $1,000 per month for 3 years, and there was a control group of 2,000 participants that only got $50 a month. So that I was off on the numbers. So it was 1,050. Okay. The money was distributed by 2 nonprofit groups and is described as the largest unconditional cash transfer program that was evaluated by a randomized controlled trial. So they gathered survey data, administrative records, data from a custom phone app. They did all kinds of things. The transfer caused, and this is where the study comes in, the transfer caused total individual income to fall by about $1,500 per year relative to the control group, excluding the transfers. The results found that there was about a 2% decrease in labor market participation and a decrease by 1.3 to 1.4 hours in working hours. Partners of the participants in the study also voluntarily reduced their work hours. So the estimates of the effects on cash on income and labor hours represents approximately a 4 to 5% decline relative to the control group mean, the study said. Basically, what they're saying is that when people are given cash, free money, they do not increase productivity. They actually decrease it. So apparently what they do is, or what they found too, was that treated participants primarily used the time gained through working less to increase leisure, also increasing time spent on driving or other transportation and finances, though the effects are modest in magnitude. So again, universal basic income is just, it's a bad idea. When you take away, and this is exactly what the Soviets found, all of, when you are provided, when you're given everything that you need and you're just handed it and you don't even need to work for it, you're just handed it, your productivity drops. Same thing they've shown in classes, in college classes. When everybody in the class gets the exact same grade or gets an average of the grade, okay, it makes a group of individuals work. It makes the entire group actually work less, especially the ones of the high productivity. They figure out quickly that, well, I'm working really, really hard to create this product or whatever. And this other group, they still get the benefit of the product off of my hard work. And so they stop working. This is exactly what happens with all of these things. There's many, many studies that have done this. So this whole idea of a universal basic income doesn't actually help people. All it does is cause them the ability to become more lazy. And that's essentially what they're finding. Speaking of work, you know how Joe Biden has been touting, in fact, he still touts today, that he created 16 million jobs over the course of his long-term period of presidency and, 3+ or whatever years. Well, apparently, and this is according to the National Pulse, apparently, there's going to be a massive revision to the U.S. employment numbers expected tomorrow. The United States Bureau of Labor and Statistics is expected to issue a major revision on employment numbers on Wednesday. The agency is set to announce its preliminary benchmark revision to the 2024 Establishment Survey. Some preliminary estimates and indicators suggest that the agency could announce a downward revision of around 1 million jobs between April of 2023 and March of 2024. Now, here's the thing. Joe Biden claims that he did 16 million jobs. He created 16 million jobs. I argue, rightly so, that 10 to 11 million of those jobs were returned jobs, not net new, but returned jobs when the restrictions from the pandemic were lifted in 2020, 2021. I'm sorry, in 2021. Okay, when they were lifted, they came back. Well, now if he has his numbers revised down another million, so you say that's 10 to 11, so that total comes to 12 million, okay? So 12 million jobs were not made by him, and he touts 16. That means he's only made 4 million jobs. Well, of course, let's be honest, the president and the government do not make jobs. They don't create jobs. The private sector creates those jobs. But that being the case, though, this does not look good coming right up before an election. Because remember, Kamala Harris was right along with him, right here with him. So the piece here continues with a downward revision of the 1 million jobs would suggest that the U.S. job market and economy are far weaker than the corporate media and Biden-Harris government has let on. Further, the revision will likely fuel additional concerns that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and other agencies under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have essentially cooked the books to the ultimate detriment of the American people. Yeah. Speaking of cooking the books, I saw a Jesse Waters episode where he was talking about the Washington Examiner taking a look at that whole crime being down thing. And it looks like the FBI has been cooking the books too. Uh-oh. So the FBI is cooking the books. The BLS is cooking the books. What else is being cooked in those books? So, yeah. So the newest jobs revision actually is, according to this chart here, talking about that there were actually job losses last year rather than job gains. I swear, this administration, I'm telling you, these guys, these Democrats, they just can't freaking get away from not lying about stuff. They want to make things look, and I've told you before too, in this program, that even though, you look at things like the inflation rate, they were talking about wages being up. Wages have actually been fairly stagnant for the last several years. And so the wages haven't caught up with the 9% inflation that we ended up with 18 months after Joe Biden took office. So even though the wage rate is still, at least by their estimates and their standards, even though the wages are a little bit higher than, even though they're a little bit higher than the current inflation rate, they still haven't recovered from being well below where the 9% inflation rate was, and slowly trickled downward, by the way. So yeah, this is all that these people do. They have no other choice but to lie. Which brings me to my next lying point, and this one actually isn't the Democrats directly, although it is definitely along the lines of the Democrats. You know those wonderful polls? And Buddy Weiser posted about the polls, about a polling place, Red Eagle Politics. So he, obviously that's a big place. And then we also have like pollsters like the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, Savage Rich Barris, as he's called. But now we have an outsider, a Swiss political scientist. Take a look at this. In Red State, says that a Swiss political scientist says that voters are actually lying to pollsters, creating this Harris poll surge. Take a closer look at this. So this political scientist has studied unique dynamics as to why incumbents win and lose. And he told Red State the polling shift towards Vice President Kamala Harris in the presidential campaign and away from former President Donald Trump are highly suspect. Dr. Louis Perron, who earned his doctorate at the University of Zurich, said, "I would not be surprised if some voters would be lying to pollsters right now." You think? Perrin, who is the author of Beat the Incumbent, Proven Strategies and Tactics to Win Elections, says, it is natural for voters to present themselves as socially or morally acceptable. He said, quote, there is currently quite a media hype around Kamala in the mainstream media. So some voters might not want to admit that they won't vote for her, he said. In recent polls, she got more than 40% among white voters. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I believe it when I see it in November. This is one reason why polls in both the United Kingdom and the United States failed to capture the true support for conservative candidates. Remember how I told you that Donald Trump actually underperforms in the polling, meaning that they always poll him lower than what he is actually performing at? Yeah. The Perrin continued and said, there is a common pattern here with the shy Tory voter or the shy Trump voter. There is a difference between public opinion, what people think, and the published opinion, what is published in the media. Some people are hesitant to speak out against the published opinion. Yeah, I am speaking out against published opinion. Yeah. So even now in the piece, they call out Real Clear Politics, the general election poll, and they still talk about how, Trump was taking the lead over Biden and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden Harris jumps in and now Harris has a lead. But you need to understand, Harris's lead is not like, the horse that came from behind and is running away toward the wire. This is still a neck and neck race. And the reason why it's still neck and neck is because people got excited. They did. They got excited over the fact that Joe Biden, who is losing, is essentially gone now. They're excited. In fact, he probably is on a California beach somewhere tanning his toes. Ugh, that's just a bad thought. I shouldn't have even said that. But anyway, the point being here is that this stuff, the poll, we're still, 70 plus days from the election. Anything can happen. And I'm telling you that when Kamala Harris, the more she gets out in front of those cameras in those unscripted moments, like what I showed you yesterday, the less likable she is going to be. And she is going to just start dropping into reality within the polls. And by the way, I'm not entirely convinced that Real Clear Politics is the way to go with polling, because like I said, even with reliable polls, you really don't want the polls. You just want to see what the trend is. You don't necessarily need to, put a lot of stock in any of the individual polls. But the fact of the matter is that I think the honeymoon is coming to an end. It might be coming to an end slowly, but I think it's coming to an end, and you're going to start to see perceptions and things shift over time. Because Kamala Harris just announced, by the way, that she is for raising taxes on corporations, and also she is for the Biden tax on unrealized gains, the capital gains tax. And she's for pushing it to almost 45%. It's like 44 point something percent. That's not going to win her voters, especially not in the higher echelon classes. She's looking to add that to her economic repertoire, and that is, that's not going to do good for businesses. Businesses aren't going to like her for that. She wants to raise, because right now I think the current tax on corporations is like 21%. And so she is looking to raise that to 28%. In other words, erase the Tax Cuts and Job Act is essentially what she's looking to do. So, yeah. Anyway. Well, we have another potential failure of the Biden administration. And that comes at a time that I think that they needed some good news out of the Middle East. Well, this honestly doesn't really surprise me any. It's pretty much what Hamas was telling Washington before they even got into this whole like third party Qatar, Egypt, all these, grabbing all of these other Arab countries and trying to make some sort of a ceasefire deal with Israel and Hamas when Hamas wasn't even at the table. Okay, so let's be honest about that. Hamas wasn't even at the table. But here in Breitbart, Anthony Blinken has been sitting over there trying to do things with this and trying to negotiate some sort of a ceasefire deal. Well, he apparently is leaving Israel empty-handed as Hamas rejects the Biden DNC ceasefire deal. Yeah, exactly. So this whole great thing, Biden actually was talking about this before the DNC. He was hoping to have a peace deal figured out with this. And basically what happened is Hamas condemned the terms of an alleged bridging proposal to move Hamas towards a ceasefire deal with Israel yesterday. Hamas representatives, I should say, told various media outlets that the provisions U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discussed with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that day were a coup against a previous Hamas-friendly proposal that Israel had rejected. Well, no kidding. Of course they're going to reject it. That's not what you do. You don't give your opponent, okay, you don't give your opponent the upper hand in a deal. You just don't. So Blinken was in Israel on Monday to discuss what he classified as the last opportunity for an end to the Israeli Defense Forces' ongoing self-defense operations in Gaza, Hamas's stronghold territory, and where they were when they launched the unprecedented October 7th attack on the Israeli homeland. So reaching a ceasefire agreement this week would have granted President Joe Biden and his political party a major diplomatic victory to tout. But yeah, nope, didn't work. So Biden himself was telling reporters on Friday that he was more optimistic than in recent months that a ceasefire deal would be possible, emphasizing that I think we've got a shot. But yeah, it's now mentioned that Hamas is backing away, and Hamas representatives told media outlets that Washington had misrepresented how close both sides were to coming to a ceasefire deal, and complained that the current terms of an agreement were too favorable to Israel. Yeah. So, a Hamas spokesman, of course, blames that the Israelis have retreated from issues included in Biden's proposal. Netanyahu's talk about agreeing to an updated proposal indicates that the U.S. administration has failed to convince him to accept the previous agreement. Now, the previous agreement was a deal proposed by the Biden administration in late May that the Israeli government immediately just said, yeah, that's not going to happen. Oh, these guys, they just can't do this. They can't do anything right. And they lie about stuff all the time. Yes, you know, I'm making potentially an entire career out of calling them out on it. by this show. Speaking about lying too. I just got to tell you this last little bit before I get out of here. Do you remember that wonderful guy by the name of Tim Walz? You know, Tampon Tim, Stolen Valor Tim, Coward Tim, who ran away from his troops going off to Iraq and lying about his DUI as well. Well, if you recall, he spent a lot of time on several outlets and talk shows and speeches. He kept talking about how Vance and Trump were against using IVF, in vitro fertilization. Okay. Now, IVF is a procedure, a medical procedure that uses or can harvest frozen embryos. Okay. Well, here's the problem. Now, keep in mind, a lot of people, and I'm just going to be, fair about this particular point. A lot of people use the term IVF as a generic term for help in getting pregnant. Okay. But here's the problem. And this is even coming out in the New York Times, by the way. So again, this is a leftist outlet that's going, oh yeah, I can't forget, Nana of JJS says, don't forget the head coach lie. Yeah, that's right. So he's got his DUI lie, his stolen valor lie, his being in combat lie, his lie about his DUI, and now he is lying about his fertility not being through IVF, which he's been claiming and trying to crash the Trump Vance, saying that they want to get rid of IVF and that it would make families impossible, like his family, which is the claim that he makes. Well, it turns out that the procedure that was used by Walz and his wife doesn't involve freezing embryos, and it's not been targeted by anti-abortion leaders. It's through another procedure, apparently, called in uterine. What is it? Where is that thing? Yeah, so he's made the claim that my wife and I used IVF to start a family, but it was actually using intrauterine insemination, or IUI, which is a different common procedure, by the way. It's a common fertility procedure, but both of them have a very distinct key difference. IUI doesn't involve in creating or discarding embryos, and so the anti-abortion leaders that are out there that they're trying to rail against are not trying to restrict this treatment, IUI. And believe it or not, IUI is actually used more often, okay? Used more often, and it's cheaper than IVF. Doesn't mean it's any more or less effective. By the way, it's actually a little less effective than IVF, but it's used more often and it's less expensive than IVF. So here he is. He's misrepresenting himself once again and misrepresenting all of his things. It's just, again, it's lie after lie after lie after lie. All the Democrats do. All they do is lie. All right, folks, that's it for me this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It is free. And once there, hunt up the American Perspective channel and make sure you hit that green follow button. If you're already over on Rumble and signed in, make sure you hit that thumbs up, because that helps me get on the leaderboard. And I need all of your help in order to make this show a continued success. I love my Whiskey Warriors. I love all of you folks. I love seeing you every single time in the chat, and I try to interact with you guys in the chat. I try to ignore some of the off-topic stuff that happens in the chat too, but it's all in good fun. So we will see you tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time for Whiskey Wednesday, right here on American Perspective. You guys have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.